Good afternoon. This is Megan Raymond with WCET. Can everybody hear me okay? Terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Issues and Trends in Edtech in 2015. We have a great group of big speakers here to start the discussion with us. And if this is your first webcast with WCET, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. We're working on lining up our first quarter webcast, and I think you'll like what you see coming forward. I'd like to thank Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available for us today. If you have any technical issues, please contact Blackboard directly, and I'll go ahead and put that number in the chat box. The speakers have mic privileges today, but you're invited to be part of the discussion. Please communicate with us via the chat box, and if you'd like, you are able to drag and drop or move that up and down so you can see more of the window. We'll be recording this presentation, and I will send you a link to the archive, the PowerPoint slides, and any resources that are shared. If we don't get to all of your questions today, I'll be sharing those questions with the presenters. They'll be providing written responses, and we'll get those back out to you. I'm sure that we'll get plenty of great provocative questions, but to keep the presentation moving, we'll go through all of the presenters' slides. Do put your questions in the chat box, and then we'll get to those at the conclusion of the presentation portion. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our moderator today, Dr. Preston Davis. He's the Director of Instructional Services and an Associate Professor at Northern Virginia Community College, and he's also a member of the WCET Steering Committee. Please welcome William.
Great, thank you very much, Megan. I'm very happy to be part of the first WCET webinar of 2015, and very happy to be able to introduce our panel of speakers today. We'll begin with Michael Abbiati, who is the Vice President for Educational Technologies for WCET and the new Executive Director for WCET. Previously, he was a Director of the Southern Regional Education Board Educational Technology Cooperative, and he is the founding director of the successful Louisiana Board of Regents Electronic Campus and former Director of Distance Education for Louisiana State University. Next, we have Jeff Borden. He is the Chief Innovation Officer at St. Leo University. For the past 12 years, Jeff worked as Vice President with Pearson Education, and prior to that, Jeff taught full-time at the University of Northern Colorado, Front Range Community College, and he was the Coordinator of Public Speaking at Metropolitan State College of Denver. Next, we have Thomas Cavanagh, is Associate Vice President for Distributed Learning at the University of Central Florida. He has served in various capacities for EDUCAUSE, the Sloan Consortium, and the Florida Virtual Campus, and the Florida Distance Learning Association, and other organizations. He is also an award-winning author of 3 crime novels. And we have Tanya Joosten. She is the new Director of E-Learning Research and Development at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She has been a teacher of tech-enhanced, blended, and online courses in the field of communications for over 15 years and is a published author in communication technology in teaching and learning. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, and I look very forward to hearing what they have to say.
Very good. Thank you, William. It's wonderful to be here. As I look through the list of attendees today, I see a lot of friends that I've seen for many, many years, and I see a lot of new friends that I'm looking forward to meeting and working with here at WCET. This particular topic, the Internet of Things, is very, very important, I think, to all of us. And the concept of looking forward into 2015 and beyond 2015 for that matter takes us to some brand new territory in educational technology. And there are some very important trends and issues that my colleagues and I will point out to you today. It's going to be difficult to limit my discussion here because these are such exciting topics, but I promise my colleagues that I will not overdo my time here. If we take a look at the Internet of Things, or IoT, in education, we find some very interesting facts. First of all, all major sectors of the American economy have an IoT strategy, except higher education. For some reason, we seem to be not ignoring, but otherwise not providing attention to the concept of the Internet of Things. That concept being connecting almost every device that we currently have or will have in the future to the global Internet, and allowing that to create a connection between people, processes, and data that will clearly define the use of technology in the educational sector from now on, no doubt about it. Secondly, higher education has now completed the transition to bricks and clicks. It used to be we were just bricks and mortar, and all of you that attend all the conferences know that people now speak of bricks and clicks, the fact that our institutions not only have very, very effective traditional classroom-based programs and credentials, but also an ever-increasing number of electronically delivered degree programs, courses, and other types of digital content related diplomas that we seek and our students seek continuously. This will continue to grow. If we look at the concept of the Internet of Things and we look at the concept of education, we put those together, what we see in terms of trends is that learners require on-demand access to an ever-increasing, widening, and deepening digital content ecosystem. You know, we have an amazing number of people out there that are developing continuously new ways to digitize and to create experiences for our students. And in fact, if we look at the data when it comes to the type of students we have today, we see the students are willing to invest their time and their resources in educational experiences, not just infrastructure or not just systems. So we have to be very sensitive as time goes on to this real demand for on-demand access to digital content. Along with that comes the fact that our faculty require an increasing amount of support at all levels. There's no question. As our faculty begin to buy into the concept of technology in the traditional classroom, or technology in the hybrid classroom, or technology in that classroom that may be in a student's home or anymore in the student's vehicle, we have to be able to prepare our faculty and to keep our faculty abreast of all of the nuances of the Internet of Things that have spread beyond the physical geographical boundaries of our campuses and now reach out into every aspect of the lives of our learner populations. Now, this trend, or these two trends actually, learners' requirements and faculty requirements, lead us to the fact that our institutions face unprecedented infrastructure, personnel, and security challenges. Just think for a moment what it means to connect all of those coffee makers in the faculty lounges to the network on your campus. Now, it may not mean much to you, but those of you that are in the security world on this call will know that this has a tremendous impact, not only on the way that we ensure that our data is secure and we ensure that our content is secure, but also we ensure that in an ongoing strategy we are able to keep private that which needs to be private, and we're able to leverage that which needs to be leveraged. And certainly all the talk about big data and what we do with big data is a wide and deep topic in itself. So let me just say that the Internet of Things, this idea of connecting every device that we could possibly imagine to the Internet, creating this very amazing place to communicate, to educate, is here. It's here to stay. If you do a little work, just Google Internet of Things, and you'll find tremendous talk going on in all of the sectors of the American economy, except education. And that is something I think that is an issue we need to deal with, and that there are trends that support needing to deal with that issue. So in the essence of time here, I'm going to turn the floor back over to our moderator. And let me just say that the Internet of Things is very real. The Internet of Things is not as nebulous as it sounds at first. And the Internet of Things will be an umbrella under which all of our academic pursuits will fall as a trend for the future. So, William, with that, I turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm sure that we'll have quite a few questions at the end of this presentation regarding the Internet of Things and how it affects higher education. But let's turn it over to Jeff Warden.
Thank you so much, Preston. I really appreciate it. I also see some friends in the list today, so thank you for having me. It's good to see some of you again. I know you're used to me delivering these sorts of messages from Colorado, but we have made the move. I am in chilly Florida. There are people wearing parkas, and it's because it's 55 degrees here. So I'm right at home, but they're pretty cold. But as I look at sort of my career over time, I think many of you might agree with this. I've really been a trend spotter. I've gone back and looked at some of the articles that I've written over the last 5 years. I think I've published something in a major publication somewhere in the last 5 years about trends that were coming for the upcoming year. And I look like I've got a 65 or 70% success rate with that. But it really is not because of any sort of ability to see the future. It really, to me, comes down to the numbers. I've been teaching in higher education for 18 years. I've taught 168 classes, I think that's the right count, over 5,000 students. I've trained 25,000 teachers. But it's really because of the more than 15,000 hours that I have spent in front of audiences talking about what needs to take place in education and technology, and then listening to them, that I've been able to crack into that top 100 of e-learning leadership for the web and try to promote some things that I think are going to happen. It's not so much that I'm better at guessing. I think I just have access to some more people. And so to that end, I think when it comes to issues and trends in 2015, I really look at the difference between revolution and revelation. For many years, we have talked about the revolutions that are coming. Edison predicted that the movie projector would fundamentally change education, that we would no longer need teachers the way that we needed them at the time, that the movie projector would really replace a lot of the infrastructure. And as you go throughout time, you can see that repeated over and over again. The television classes, the internet itself when it was invented. Then of course, as we get to recent things, you've got the MOOCs, open education, all sorts of things are going to revolutionize education. And yet, as we have really learned over time, the revelation suggests that there has been no revolution. As we start to look at what these technologies do, we have better research, we have better frameworks. And I think things like the SAMR model that Pentadora put together, or perhaps you like Rattle, or whatever framework you like, you start to look at the research around it, the implementation stories and case studies around it, and you can see that most technology is simply a substitution for a previously used process or product or service. There's really very little strategy that has changed. There's very little change that happens in terms of how teaching and learning takes place. Just the assumption that the old way was the right way, let's just include some sort of new technology. At the same time, as you look at other revolutions that people have talked about for a long time, I think about some of the work around rigor and how some of the accreditors have really been talking about making the higher education experience more rigorous. And so a lot of people are talking about new methodologies and rigor. I think about the open resource market and the open education resources that were going to change everything and put certain vendors out of business and really make a big splash when it came to education that was open, available, and free to all. I think about the learning analytics that have been promised to people for years, that if you have the right analytics in place, you can solve every problem and every equation when it comes to education. And yet the revelation suggests that, again, none of those have really done what people originally said they would do. When it came to rigor, there were a lot more questions produced than answers. We now know how difficult it is to deal with OER. I was at a conference recently on OER alone. That was the entire conference topic. And by the time we were done, the panelists were saying, we just don't think it's reached its potential. It's just nowhere near the promise that we hoped it would be close to. And then as you look at data, there are so many closed systems, systems that don't talk to one another. There's politics involved in that data and the analytics around it. And so the revelations have really just shown us that we have a long way to go. So I think that 2015 is going to be one of those parts of a cycle where people just stop, take stock, look at the research we now have, and begin to implement in a different way, perhaps to reconfigure, to remix. I think that 2015 is not about revolution, nor is it about revelation, but it's about evolution. I think that we are going to see more educators being given professional development around teaching and learning concepts, to see how to apply those apps and those pieces of software and those technologies and those social media elements and those other connective elements of connective tissue that we have in the educational DNA, to be able to say, how do we do this in a way that is better for students? I think we will start to see less competition between some old adversaries. It doesn't have to be teaching and learning versus research. A lot of schools are starting to understand that there is a place for both, and that teaching and learning needs to be front and center when it comes to the students, whereas research might do some things around funding. And so as the evolution of education takes place, I think we will see more balance in the way of teaching versus researching. Same with the old verses of, do you weed out students or do you help them be complete and successful and matriculated? I think we're going to see much more in the way of balance when it comes to helping our students be successful, all of our students be successful. We now seem to understand that that is our job. Our job is not to take out students that don't deserve to be there or don't want to do the kinds of things we ask them to do. It's instead about helping them all be successful so that they can be good citizens and have good health and be good family members and work in ways that are entrepreneurial and helpful to society. We are really working toward that evolution. The same, of course, I think applies to data. We've heard all the promises, but we have now seen all the trials and the pitfalls when those systems don't talk to one another. And so I believe that in 2015 we will see people coming back to home, coming back to base, if you will, and starting again, and starting to stitch together systems that didn't used to talk to one another, and finding better ways by which to make those systems begin to communicate. I think in 2015 we will see all the one-offs that we're used to. Education is really good at this. We'll see competency-based learnings continue to move. I actually wrote about that in 2013 as a trend that was coming, because if you follow the money, there's a lot of money being put into competency-based learning. The Department of Ed is backing competency-based learning. I think we'll see the $10,000 baccalaureates and other numbers that are just sort of out there as a threshold being shot at for research. I think people will try and attempt those things. Gamification will continue to have upticks. Groups like LinkedIn will really push badging and try to put a lot of resources and energy behind it. But generally speaking, I think 2015 is going to be a bit of a year of reset, a time for people to look at maybe some old elements that were not implemented well and start to figure out how they can be implemented well. I don't know, maybe even you'll see Second Life or something like that reappear, now that people know how much better you could implement a completely immersive environment instead of just switching out a schoolroom for a virtual schoolroom. With that, I'll turn it back over to Preston, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Very nice, thank you, Jeff. We'll continue to move forward now with Tom Cavanagh.
Great, thank you everybody. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk about one trend with sort of many elements, and I'm calling that trend personalization. And by that, I'll get into some of the details, but I think it begins with a recognition that institutions nowadays are rarely a single homogeneous entity. They are much more heterogeneous, they are diverse, they serve a variety of different student populations. The typical 18-year-old high school graduate coming to college and living in a dorm still exists, but is actually the minority now. So we have all of these different kinds of students coming, and this is no surprise to the people on this call or this webinar, but for many people out sort of in the general society and the media and especially policymakers, I think that this is something that we can help educate them on, because it affects what I think is this personalization trend that we will be facing in the next year and beyond. I saw some interesting statistics recently that said from the Institute for Women's Policy Research Center that 26% of all undergraduate students are raising dependent children. So over a quarter of all undergraduate students today are raising dependent children, and that 71% of those students are single mothers. I think if that doesn't sort of illustrate the picture of a diverse student population, I'm not sure what will. So I'm reminded of an elephant. You might say, why are you reminded of an elephant, Tom? That classic story of the three blind men who must describe an elephant. The one who has the tail describes it as a long, skinny creature. The one who's got his hand on the side of the elephant describes it as a big, giant, lumbering sort of creature. And then the one with his hand on the ear describes it as something with these interesting wings. You've all heard that tale. But I think it's true, because personalization is also happening at a large scale for institutions. And I know Paul LeBlanc and Clayton Christensen and many others have talked and written about the disaggregation of higher education. And that's kind of what they mean. And I think that is a trend that is here to stay. I think that Jeff's school, St. Leo, is an example of this. If you look over in West Central Florida, they have a lovely campus for more traditional students serving a liberal arts curriculum, but they also have these teaching sites all around the country where they serve a lot of military and other students. And then they have a very mature online operation. Each one of those parts of the institution serves a different student base, but they're all St. Leo. And another good example would be Southern New Hampshire University. And many of you are familiar with Southern New Hampshire, but it's the same kind of a thing. They've got the liberal arts campus for a traditional, right out of high school kind of student. They've got a very, very robust online operation. And then they've got College for America, which is their competency-based program with a lot of corporate partnerships. Three completely different kinds of student populations being served by a single institution. Yet to each of them, that is Southern New Hampshire University. What the institution is doing is personalizing the way it reaches and serves each of those student populations. So for an individual student, this trend towards personalization, treats each of them as the special snowflake that they are. And underneath that, there are a number of activities that fall under that larger umbrella. For example, adaptive learning. There's been so much written, it seems to be supplanting the MOOC as the big, the big hype of the year, adaptive learning. But there seems to be a there where the system adapts and personalizes the experience for each individual student if it's doing what the rhetoric is claiming to do. Learning analytics, that has been around for a while, but it finally seems to be getting some wheels underneath it, and being able to intervene for students in customized ways, individualized for the student with unique interventions depending upon what their particular issue might be, is the domain of learning analytics. Competency-based education that was just mentioned, that definitely is going up the hype cycle. And it seems to be something that is here to stay and definitely has a place in this spectrum of personalization. Certain kinds of students it serves very well. Other kinds of students not so well. It needs to be personalized. Prior learning assessment for those students who enter higher ed with particular accomplishments, whether from the military or through advanced placement or taking a MOOC or whatever the case might be. That is another way of personalizing. Integrated planning and advising systems. The Gates Foundation has done quite a bit in this area, such as the Student Success Planner that came out of Sinclair Community College. Those are really good examples of personalizing the advising and student services side of things as a complement to what's happening in the personalization on the teaching and learning side. And then back to the good old-fashioned high-touch student success coaches. While they might be technologically mediated, these are human beings that are personalizing the coaching for students so that they can all be successful. So you might say, well, gee, Tom, personalization isn't exactly new. There was the old, the still existing British tutor model where you're sort of like one-on-one with a faculty member and it's kind of an independent study. And yes, that exists, but that's not really scalable. What this trend is kind of pointing towards is the fact that technology is finally kind of caught up and allowing us to scale these personalization activities in a way that was never previously possible. And as that technology improves, my prediction is that the results will improve. We'll get better data. We'll develop more effective interventions. Students will be more engaged. Their outcomes will be improved, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this personalization umbrella is a way of putting a framework around a number of activities that are going on but are all related in some way to being the most effective it can be for individual students in personalized ways. And with that, let me turn it back over to Preston.
Great, thank you so much. And we will now turn it over to Tanya Joosten.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it's great to come last because then at this point we can really identify the commonalities between all of the different presenters' responses to what are going to be the up-and-coming trends. As you know, for some of you who looked in the chat, and just a reminder, there is a conversation back channel on Twitter going on. We're using the hashtag WCET trends. So it's great to see all of the comments and people's responses to what we've been talking about. So please feel free to join us at that conversation. So one of the things that I do is, you know, as Jeff had mentioned, I don't really have a crystal ball and I don't know necessarily what the trends are or can make predictions, but I think that there's lots of things, I know for myself as a social scientist, that we can look at what's going on in our society and sort of feel where things are going here into the future. So one of the things I think that we've seen over the last few years is really this focus on being real and this idea of authenticity, not only for teachers in the classroom, as for years we've been focusing on, you know, in particular in the online classroom, you know, how do we develop social presence, how do we establish our voice, build connections with our students through this, and so forth. But we're also seeing this, I think, in part due to the increase of social media. So there's higher levels of self-disclosure, not only of individuals, but of institutions, which has sort of led to individuals and students or junior staff or just all of those in the institution in general sort of increasing the weight that they're putting on, you know, folks wanting other folks to sort of be real and be human and be authentic. And so also I think we're seeing this shift in sort of this idea that emotions are being valued now, that you can share more, you can disclose a little bit more about what you're going through. We've seen in the last decade or so a push for emotional intelligence being valued over other intelligence. And so I think we're seeing this greater need to develop an identity as an instructor, as an institution, to express that identity in authentic ways through social media. Also sort of building the strong culture and sharing your values and showing your pride through different communication technologies. So it's no longer sort of the day of closed off walls, focusing on, you know, sort of packaging away those emotions, but really showing who you are. And so I think moving forward, and we're already seeing this, is there's going to be a push to provide more rich and authentic experiences. And I think Tom really highlighted that in talking about this push towards personalized learning, personalized experience and support. I think also there's an increased expectation not only in the classroom, but with the, in the institution, to be encouraging students to sort of be cheerleaders. And I think, again, we're seeing this in social media. We also see this with different models. At the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, we have something called Amplified Assistance in our mastery-based courses. And we also see this in our academic coaches that we have in our competency-based course. Also, we're looking at advisors and other student services that are communicating with students through everyday technologies, again, like texting or Twitter and so forth, to sort of show that we care and that we're there for you and support our students in the manner in which they expect it. Another trend that I think we see, as Jeff already alluded to, is this idea of openness. So we're at a point in our society where everybody has the ability to find information from resources and from each other. There's sort of this status leveling or this democratizing of information. It's no longer scarce. So we have an increased expectation from our students and from our instructors that resources are going to be at their fingertips. They're going to be easy to gather and possibly free. Obviously, as has been mentioned, is that there's going to be this push not only at the institutional level, but for all of higher ed, as we already have, to provide openness in teaching, research, and in the profession. So we see a move for more open courses, open content, open pedagogy. As far as our research, we see a move for open data, open findings and publication, or in open journals. Martin Waller just put out a new book on open. It's free and open, so I would strongly recommend checking it out. And also openness in the profession. So we're looking for more folks to be blogging about their experiences in the institution. For example, Joan Bozarth has her book out, Show Your Work. And so we're seeing more information that used to be closed off or very implicit, now becoming, or tacit, becoming very explicit. And we're able to capture more knowledge, institutional knowledge or organizational knowledge, because of these things. And the next couple I'm going to talk about sort of overlap here, but we see sort of, as we mentioned, this, I think it was Michael mentioning in the beginning, like everybody's got all of these devices and connecting to the internet. And so I think that with this anytime, anywhere sort of thing, people expect information and services no matter where they are from whatever device at any time of the day. This has obviously driven a lot to push higher ed, because that this is how people are in their everyday life. When you book a airline ticket or something like that, or you even buy a car, there's like a little chat box. Can I help you? You can do this at any time of the day. So there's sort of this push for this seamlessness to provide services or even provide learning opportunities or support without sort of the thoughts of, what broadband is there, or what operating system do I have? I just want to do these things. And the second thing that sort of overlaps this a little bit is sort of the idea of access. So I think there's the one thing that it's the anytime, anywhere, this idea of we want to push time. I think the second piece of this is that we're at a point where, years ago when I used to teach my communication technology class, we would talk about, who has dial-up access. And and the digital divide, and then it moved to who had broadband, and then they sort of redefined broadband, and then it was 3G and 4G, and then it was what operating system do you have and what applications work with that, and we're just so beyond that for the most part. So it's sort of like no matter the distance, the time, the device, the operating system, or the bandwidth, or the ability or disability, there is an expectation to be able to learn digitally and get support digitally from our students. And so I think in some ways that's really pushed what we're seeing here on our campuses. We're, as I know several, Tom and Jeff mentioned, mastery-based learning and competency-based education and push for that. But I think overall, our students who are coming, and again, we know that many of them are coming with families and different work commitments, but there's definitely an expectation to students, or a desire to push time is what we call it. So they really are looking for flexibility in their course format, in their timed degrees. So I think we're going to see an increase in diversity of online offerings, more obviously mastery-based and competency-based education that would be available to them. So I think also we're going to see more of that just-in-time support, so that no matter what time of day that students are working on something, maybe more individualized so that they can push time, they're still going to want sort of that cheerleader or that encourager to help them. And I think with this, you know, it's not anymore about this idea of the course or the content. It's really more about how do we create experiences for students that they have more contact with other people. It might be their peers, it might be coaches, you know, it might be student support staff or those sorts of things, not necessarily just faculty. And so I think that, you know, obviously we've seen some common themes here throughout. And just to drive home another common theme when it comes to the idea of data. So I think a lot of this has to do, well, with two things. I guess as budget's slim, you know, there's sort of this additional pressure to make sure the financial investments are yielding results. And so we're looking to data to help us do that. I think also we don't have as much money, so we need to be more careful where we're investing in it. And then two, you know, this is great. So many things in teaching and learning and in service are happening digitally. So we have all of these digital footprints or this data that we can use. We also have more applications that are allowing us to interpret and understand the data. And we can better use this to drive decisions. So I think moving forward, we're going to be looking at our data. You know, who are our students, what should we be doing, and what works? And we're really going to be focusing our investments around that. And I think just in general, there's going to be more investments in data gathering and storage and analysis and application to help us make those informed decisions, which I know, you know, we've sort of talked about here today. So overall, those are just sort of the things that I see that are happening in society that are probably going to continue to drive education in these ways. So thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. We will certainly open it up to questions. Feel free to type questions in the chat box, and we will be happy to address as many of those questions as we possibly can. We do have a few questions to get us started, and I will begin with one that was posted in the chat box. The comment says that a recent research article by Stanford indicated that students using technology such as laptops, iPads, so on, cause less comprehension and a drop in achievement. Are there any comments on that? And we'll ask that each of the speakers, in the order that they spoke, maybe comment on this question that was posed in the chat window.
Sure, thanks, Preston. So I think that this is a bit of what I was alluding to. You know, we're discovering more and more and more all the time about our brain, about how we learn, about the pros and cons of education technology and the contextuality of education technology. And I think that this is some of what we're starting to get to. That study, I think, I mean, there's some issues with being able to extrapolate to all populations, but I think that it's important to note that in some ways there are probably better contexts for some learners than for others. And so sometimes that means that reading on a device is better for one, whereas it's worse for another. And so as we drive toward what my co-presenters were both talking about with regard to personalization, I like the notion that data can start to get us to a place where we can determine the best route for learning by any student. And that would have to do with content, that would have to do with instruction, that would have to do with all the different aspects that we know exist in the education landscape. And I think that, again, we're on the precipice. We're not there, but we're very close. And I think that that kind of research is good and important, but the ramifications of that, the implementation of that is important.
I can comment on that as well. The idea of well, we have a saying here at UCF that simply adding technology without changing the process around that technology really only adds cost and complexity. So I'm not familiar with that study at Stanford, but if it was simply just handing students an iPad or whatever and expecting some magic to happen, I'm not surprised. It's really about changing the process and leveraging the particular affordances of a piece of technology to improve something. And if it's just the inclusion of technology, I am usually pretty skeptical.
Yes, Tom, this is Mike. I agree. I think that the study is not much different from studies we've seen about technology from the very beginning. Those of you remember the no significant difference phenomenon. I think we need to realize that technology is a piece of a very, very large puzzle. That teaching and learning is a game of relationships, and we've just inserted technology into the relationship cycle. And I think that as we go on, as we learn more, and as we learn what we can do with the data, and as we learn to apply the knowledge that we gain from the data, I think we're going to find that it's not a matter of technology. It's a matter of how that relationship is improved.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We do have another question in the window. The trends toward personalization are often in opposition to faculty's preference to guide groups of students through a learning process, and often see personalization as way too much hand-holding. What good models have you all seen to get faculty on board with this?
Maybe I'll start with that one since I was the one who invoked personalization. It's funny, on Monday I was in a committee meeting and I had invited one of the faculty members who's doing our adaptive learning pilot to present to some other folks, including other faculty members. And one of the questions I got from somebody in the audience was, he was very skeptical. And the concern was, what if one of the pedagogical objectives was to make the student uncomfortable and to learn in a new way, as opposed to constantly meeting them where they are and giving them sort of the most individualized path. And although we didn't have time to sort of really get into it and debate it, my answer kind of was, and would have been if I probably will have another opportunity to talk to them about it, is that then maybe this isn't the best strategy for that kind of a pedagogical objective. But in general, and again, I think this personalization is newish, so I think models are still emerging. But I think couching it in student success terms generally works for me, because I don't know about you, but very few faculty do I meet don't want student success. And if they can have a tool in their hands, whether that's an analytics tool that allows them to identify students that are most at risk, faculty really like that. It makes their job easier, for one, but it also, more importantly, helps them better serve students and help students be successful. So framing it through that lens of student success has helped me in explaining some of the reasoning behind why we're doing some of the pilots and experiments that we're doing here.
This is Tanya. I just wanted to emphasize a little bit about what Tom said. I think, and I know Jeff had mentioned this as well, and we've all talked about this, that education has changed and that we are not institutions that are focusing on weeding out anymore. We can't afford to do that. It's a much more competitive marketplace. And so we are looking to ensure that our students are retained and that they're successful. And so I think that's really a focus of where personalization comes in, especially when we're talking about, certain courses like large lecture courses that are, a big challenge when it comes to retention and so forth. And so I think by focusing on student success, that is where personalization comes into play. And I think that I get a little disturbed sometimes, as an instructor and so forth, that when people say, well, this is hand-holding, or we're doing too much hand-holding. And for me, I just view it as I'm encouraging my students to be successful. So it's hard to always to hear that one come up.
Excellent. We have a question from Twitter. Teaching and learning is about relationships. how does technology improve those relationships, which leads to improved learning? Maybe we can have Tom start with this one as well.
Sure. Well, learning is often about relationships, but not always. Sometimes it's about content acquisition, I guess. It may not be as trendy to say that. I think it's all about context, and we have a particular dean here in one of our colleges who's not, frankly, despite the amount of online learning we do, the greatest fan of online learning. And he really values and privileges this sort of Aristotelian model of a master on one end of the log and the student at the other end of the log, and it should be this relationship. And what I've pitched to him is, how about we build you a digital log so that you can reach more students or different kinds of students in different ways, and we're still having that discussion. But I don't think technology necessarily takes the human being out of it. I think it just sort of changes the role a little bit. I've even had some faculty on our adaptive learning pilots say that. They are not doing any less work or interacting with students in any less amount. But the way they interact with them is changing, at least based on our adaptive pilot. And it's becoming a little more focused, a little more personalized. So I think the relationships are still there, but the technology, when properly implemented, I think can make them more effective.
Yeah, Tom, this is Mike. I agree, and I'd like to add, since I brought up the relationships earlier, that what's happening is our students now are very highly interconnected. We're sitting here answering questions from Twitter and doing all the other kinds of things that we do every day, all day long. Each one of those interchanges is a relationship. And when we start using the social media in the classroom, and we start using the other technology tools in the classroom, we're doing so to enhance a relationship between a learner and quite a variety of content deliverers. So the demand that our students are presenting us is that they want to change the relationship model. They want to intensify the amount of information that defines that relationship. And it's going to be very exciting to see what all of these IoT-related devices and systems and processes that we develop do in fact impact the relationship. My personal opinion is that I think we're going to see some stronger relationships, and we're going to see some of that transfer of learning that we always talk about actually take place, because the relationships that built that transfer of learning are indeed enhanced by and maybe even created by the technology.
Mike, I would add to that. I think that the word that you chose in there, connecting, I think is even more powerful perhaps than relationship. I think we're playing a little bit with semantics here, but to me, learning is about connecting people to ideas. It's about connecting old to new. It's about connecting people to people. And that does not necessarily have to be a student to a single instructor. It certainly can be, and that relationship can be powerful, and a lot of good things can come from it. But there are plenty of other connections that can be made that can be just as powerful to a student and encourage and enhance, augment their learning in very meaningful ways. And the power of technology is really the ability to connect to so many more things, people, and places than we ever have before. That's really how I think it might behoove us to look at it that way, instead of quite so relationship bound.
So I agree, and I think for every connection, we create a relationship. Back in the old days, a connection was a connection, but today those connections are going much broader and deeper. So I agree with you. I would just think that we are changing connections into relationships, and probably vice versa in many areas.
Yeah, I think building, when you talk about relationships and building, and hi Julie, how are you doing? I think one of the things is it's not just about human relations anymore. I think, obviously we're looking to build student-student relationships, less probably student to instructor, although still important, but also student to content. build connections of student to experiences, to student and to the profession. I think, and I just was tweeting about this a minute ago, this came up when we were working on the Horizon report, when we were talking about what are the things that keep you up at night, or the future trends, or the mega trends, and it wasn't about any one technology. It was how do we use technology to build connections. I always just thought of content as a thing, but now we spend so much time thinking about how can we make content engaging? How can we build a connection between the student in the content, in the way that we design the content, in the way that the student receives it and consumes it. And so I think it's just our idea of relationships is different, and that we really focus on connectedness.
Okay, I have a question for Jeff, and certainly any of the other panelists are happy to add comments after that as well. But why do you think older technologies will be remixed as newer technologies are introduced?
Yeah, Preston. So I think that it's notable that over the last 12 months, and as we start talking about trends for the upcoming 12 months, I think it's pretty safe to look at the last 12. I have met more in that period of time than ever before, more people who are coming out of other sectors and into education technology. One of the biggest examples of that I think you can see is search engines are now letting loose a lot of people. A lot of people who used to work at Google or Yahoo or other search areas are now going on to ACE Learning, and they're creating other companies that are trying to fix problems that traditionally some education technologists had tried to fix, and now they're coming at it from a different perspective. And that they're really going to reap the benefits of all of the mistakes that we've made up to this point, to be able to fix things quicker in a more agile way, and quite possibly much better, so that we can take the foundational stuff that we've been doing, look at what hasn't worked, and then start to tweak it and implement it in a way that will work. At the same time, I am seeing more and more professional development at conferences, in seminars, at schools themselves, asking how to take technologies that we have worked with for years, from learning management systems to social media and beyond, and they're starting to ask, what have we done wrong and how do we do it better? Or sometimes I've actually heard them say, how do we do it right? Indicating that they have not done it right till now. And I think it's that remixing that I think that's going to benefit everyone as we get a little bit more stability in the use of these technological tools in a strategic way for education, not just for the sake of the technology, but in ways that actually speak to educational principles and ideas. And so that's what I'm seeing. I'd love to hear if any of the other panelists are seeing that too.
Well, I will just add that I certainly think that you're onto something with that, and I think that it extends beyond remixing technologies that have been used in education. But I think in looking at what Michael was talking about with the Internet of Things, looking at all of these technology tools that really have not been created, certainly not with education in mind specifically, or have not been utilized widely for educational purposes. But I think that a lot of those tools do have a place in education, and we will see a lot more of those existing tools being tailored or being adopted in an educational environment.
I think just to emphasize that a bit more, one of the things that we're seeing is there's so many technologies that are out there that are free or off the shelf that provide the media characteristics and the functionality that allows us to meet our needs inside and outside of the classroom. I mean, obviously social media is a huge one. I think we're at the point, though, that we can identify based on our pedagogical needs or our student support needs those technologies that are widely being used by students and faculty or staff, and look to identify how those help us meet our needs. I think then that leaves us with certain needs that can't be met by technologies right now that exist. And I think, you know, For example, data analysis. I think for those without certain expertise, it's hard to find things that can be used by all that produce results in a consumable form that allow individuals to take action based off of those results. And so I do see some areas in education where we have schools that have not been developed yet, that we really need to start partnering with tech startups or other tech companies, or look to harness our own resources on campus to develop that technology that we need to put forth and to be more effective or efficient at certain processes within the organization.
Yeah, and Tanya, this is Mike. I'd like to kind of wrap those last two discussions into a comment here. We're seeing an influx in expertise coming into higher education because of changes in the commercial market, and that's something we really should be aware of. And it deals with not only being able to repurpose technologies that were created earlier, but also do exactly what you're saying, Tanya, create those new technologies that we need to create. And I think, too, having the new members from the commercial market come into our support systems, or our classrooms for that matter, may help us fill a serious gap that will continue, that being the gap of having those individuals, Tanya, that you mentioned, who can actually interpret that data that we're collecting. If we have one Achilles heel of everything that we've been talking about, is the fact that you can have all the Internet of Things in the world that you want, you can collect all the data in the world that you want, but if you don't have the individuals on the campuses that can interpret that data and then provide the knowledge that comes from that data to the decision makers, then we have a serious problem.
And I have one more question directed for Tanya. What steps do you think institutions can take to ensure effectiveness in teaching and learning with these technologies? And certainly any of the other panelists are welcome to comment on this as well.
Thanks. Well, I think one of the interesting things is we talk a lot here about what are the trends, what are the technologies that are supporting those trends, and so forth. One of the things that we probably didn't talk a lot about, although it was mentioned, was the importance of faculty. I think obviously faculty buy-in is something that we need to think about as we move forward with these initiatives on our campus based on societal trends. I think we need to also incentivize faculty, and that doesn't necessarily mean financially or temporally, but I think there are ways to incentivize faculty to be engaged with the changes that are happening in higher ed. Whether that's through justification or faculty development or community building. Faculty development is obviously a key. I mean, you can throw out all the iPads and technology that you want, but if we're not investing in faculty development and incentivizing faculty and getting their buy-in to use these technologies in pedagogically effective ways, then it really is just a waste of resources in all sorts of ways. So I think that that's really key.
Very good. Well, I certainly want to thank all of our panelists for participating today and sharing their ideas. I, at this time, will turn it over to Megan to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Preston, and thank you to all of our panelists. This is Megan. Mike and I realize that technology is something that works as it should most of the time, but sometimes you have to be agile and adapt. So we partnered today. So do stay connected with us. We have an exciting agenda planned this year for 2015. We have the summit that I mentioned, the Adaptive Learning Summit in Santa Fe, and more to come on that. Save the dates, November 11th to the 13th in Denver for our annual meeting, and the call for proposals will be announced in March, and anybody is welcome to submit a proposal. If you're not a member, do consider joining WCET. Lots of benefits, including our very popular news digest, active listers, and discounts to our events and programs. The webcast is being recorded. I will send